I am Dusan Kwiatkowski of Live Oak Brewing, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest is Josh Brengle of Cervecería Hercules, and he's here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. To support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. First Tea offers more than tea, bringing herbs and botanicals from across the globe to your doorstep. Be it flower, root, or leaf, contact First Tea to find colorful, fragrant, flavorful botanicals. Email info@firsttea.com. That's FIRSDTEA.com to find out more.
I'm Bo Baden from Sherman Street Beer Company in Allentown, PA, and I use Malteurop because the malt works great, tastes great too. We use Malteurop malts exclusively because of the quality and their service. We've been super happy with the overall performance as well. Contact Malteurop today and visit malteuropmaltingco.com.
Today's episode is sponsored by Stomp Stickers. Stomp is a proud member of the Brewers Association that produces a wide variety of printed brewery products, such as beer labels, keg collars, coasters, beer boxes, and much more. Stomp's website features an easy-to-use digital design tool, low quantity orders, fast turnaround times, and free domestic shipping. Visit stompstickers.com and use code BREWER for 15% off of your first order.
Okay, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Originally from Florida, Josh Brengle has been brewing for around 20 years and has been a professional brewer around 15 years, holding various jobs within the industry, most notably 6 years at Cigar City Brewing in Tampa, Florida, where he was the lead brewer and production manager. He's been in Mexico now for 8 years at Cervecería Hercules, the same amount of time. Josh, welcome to the show.
Man, thanks, Dusan. I really gives me chills that you thought of me. And I'm a huge Live Oak fan, and everything you guys do in the war for beer flavored beer is just it's great. So I got to give props for it too.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. I was before the podcast manifested, I had plans. We haven't met, but we've emailed a little bit, and I was actually planning to be in Querétaro this week. Back in the spring, I was trying to make it happen, but it fell through, pushed back to a later date. But yeah, here we are getting to chat without beers, about beer and lager beer. So I guess I don't have too many full questions written out, but I do have one question for you, and that's what is a Mexican lager?
Oh man, that's really that's a real tough one, just because I guess you could say any lager made in Mexico is a Mexican lager, correct? So doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, if you're not thinking of just the style, just geography, obviously, we could make like a Doppelbock down here and it'd still be a Mexican lager. But I think if you do want to look at, history and look at, what was happening, especially if you think of like people like Santiago Graf and other people that were involved in like kind of shaping what those styles ended up being, might just be a very refreshing lager, whether it be amber, pale, or even slightly dark. Most of the industrial examples will have some amount of like corn sugar or even high fructose corn syrup or solids or rice solids or something like that in there. It's an adjunct driven style. And it's kind of harkening back to what, maybe some of those styles used to be in continental Europe a long time ago. So long story short, I don't have like I wish I had like an answer. my 8 years here in Mexico, I've kind of like thought about that one a lot, and I'm always back where like it's really hard for me as a person just to like compartmentalize styles as it is, you know, to like um figure out and put everything like neatly in its place, you know. But you know, I think for me, you know, it's a little difficult to think about, you know, Mexican lager fits exactly here, but yeah, I guess it's just everyone has their own definition. It's the best way to put it.
Yeah, well, I like that answer, and yeah, I like the brewing lager in Mexico, which what you guys have been doing for how long has Hercules produced beer?
So the first breweries were about I think 12 years ago, and the brewery remained quite small for the first 5 years or so, and then I came on in 2016 as a consultant. I was down here, you know, looking for work, and yeah, it just kind of happened that stumbled upon Hercules and saw what they were doing. At the time, you know, there was only just a couple beer styles, and they weren't making that much beer, like I said. But yeah, now it's been about 12 years, and now I think we're doing about 8,000 barrels a year, or something like that. So grown quite substantially in the last, you know, 8 years that I've been there. And I would say, yeah, we've been working on a full blown expansion, probably similar to what you guys went through with. You guys have like a BrowCon, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah, in 2015. Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, and I do have that in my some structures about that. I think I'll ask you about that in a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you moved before you were working with Hercules, you moved to Mexico. Had you moved to Mexico at that point? Or were you
It kind of all happened at the same time, actually, because you know my wife was working for Constellation Brands, so she was like in charge of all the hop and malt procurement. You know, she's from Mexico City, and she was working at the main Constellation. Yeah, she was working at the main like Constellation office here in Mexico City, and we actually met on a malt trip, like a Canada malting trip up in like Alberta. So like Canadian Rockies, just super beautiful, and we hit it off, and we started dating, and we used to like meet up and travel together, and you know it was pretty it wasn't like super serious, and then she hit me up one day and was like, you got to come to Mexico City like right now, we got to talk, you know. And it turns out, you know, I got on a plane, and it turns out she was pregnant, so it expedited, you know, the seriousness of the situation. And yeah, so you know, we were talking about like whether she goes to Florida or if we move somewhere else completely. I had a couple like job offers on the table at the time. Like a good friend had opened up a brewery in Vietnam. I was kind of looking for a change of scenery at the same time. So when it came to really talk about it, I said, well, let's look at Mexico. I really liked Mexico City and central Mexico, the whole like Bajo region, from the few times I'd gotten to travel there. And the food and the people, everything was great. There's definitely some craft breweries, but nothing like in the U.S. Really like very small operations, a lot of home brewing, stuff like that. So it took me a while to find something, and I had actually, yeah, I hadn't moved to Mexico City yet. Actually, when I first found out about Hercules, it was the owner, Luis, that had called me, and I went out there on a day trip on one of my trips to Mexico. I just took the bus out and said, yeah, I'm gonna go see what this whole thing's about, you know. And I saw it was like 3 hours from where I was gonna live, so I was like, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's too far. But I went out there anyway to check it out, and you know, I'm an anthropology major in college, so like when I saw it,
cool.
Like yeah, it's like a 180-year-old textile plant, and it's got, I mean, just crazy pre-Hispanic history. It's got a ton of like colonial Hispanic history. Also, like it was the first place that the Spanish touched when they got to the Bajo region, really. So there's just like all kinds of stories, like going back, you know, 1500s and up to today, really. So I saw that, and I was actually more interested in that than I was the beer program at the moment. Like, but that was like the selling point where I was like, oh man, I gotta figure out how to get in there. Like that place looks cool. So that was pretty much it.
Yeah, cool. And that sounds like a yeah, good call and a great change of scenery. So yeah, so I learned about Hercules a little bit before. So I was in Mexico City in January, and
Oh, cool.
I'm in Texas, and I like I love going to Mexico. Been there a bunch.
Mhm.
I hadn't been. This is my
Mhm.
first time in Mexico City.
Mhm.
So I pretty much just stayed in the area. But then I learned about Hercules from my friend Trent. He lives up in Washington, and he had been there. He went to the pub. He also went to the brewery, I believe, a couple months before I was there. And so I was like, oh wow, I didn't know there was, you know, German Austrian lager beer being brewed down there. And so
Yeah.
I went to the pub, which is kind of new in Mexico City, the Hercules,
Yeah. The lager bar. That
the
one.
lager bar. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had the Czech pills, I mean, I had everything, the extra Marga. I don't think maybe I didn't have the Doppelbock. You had a rye lager,
Mm.
Los Magos del Frio pills. I don't remember what
Oh,
that
cool.
was. Um, and then,
That was one we did with I think Wayfinder and with Wayfinder and Von Ebert actually.
mhm,
Yeah,
cool.
it was a nice pill.
And then a lager with corn, Vienna
Mm-hmm.
lager and a Helles and a
Oh,
schnitzel,
cool.
like a really good schnitzel also. It was, and some, and you can get some mezcal. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I was like, wow, this is good.
Yeah.
All the beers were really good. And so I was like, well,
Oh
I'm not
man.
going to make it out to the brewery this time, but next time. But yeah, still haven't made it out there. But so
Yeah.
let's see. So I wanted to ask about the corn that you're using in the corn lager. What kind of corn is that?
So yeah, that's another one that's been like a journey for us, like cause and a quick story, that one of the top rated restaurants in Mexico, here in Mexico City, it's called Pujol. Like it's one of those places you just have to be on a list forever, like to get in. And you know, the head chef, I remember at one point I just started here, and there was a little bit of a demand for that, but I was also like, hey, we're in Mexico, we got to make like a Mexican lager, right? We got to like make a corn lager, and of course, like we didn't have the means on that brew house to do like any sort of like cereal cooking or we didn't have a mash cooker or anything like that, so we were just like, well, let's just use the breeze flakes. I remember this guy who's like super, this chef, he's like super into mice and corn, and there's 10,000 different varieties of corn in Mexico. It's the supposed birthplace of corn is here in Mexico, so it's like it's held to a very, it's almost like a religious thing, like for people, like the
Mm-hmm.
tortilla and corn and the way it's used in culinary, in the kitchen. It's like such a big thing. So he was like, "Oh, so where are you sourcing your corn from? Because we really like the beer and we want to sell it." And I was like, yeah, kind of choked up. Like I didn't even know how to say it. Like tell him like, yeah, we're importing corn from like industrial corn from the U.S. It's been gelatinized and flaked." And I think he was like, "Oh, okay." Like so in that moment, I was kind of like, "Yeah, we got to get a mash cooker over here." So we worked with a local fabricator and got that going. And since then, we've done just dozens of corn beers. Our biggest one is called Lager Mice, and it's just like it's exactly what you think when you say like Mexican lager. It's stereotypical, like just very light, 12 to 13 BUs, and it's 20 or 25% corn. So we do the entire cereal cook on that. But we've been messing around with different varieties of corn, like black corn, blue corn, corn for pozole, corn for palomita corn, like just all the different types, and you can just find everything here.
Yeah, so
Um,
many options.
so many options. The thing is just through the mashing process, it becomes so yeah, fermentable. It kind of gets lost because obviously you can't use a high amount without having a lot of issues with maybe lautering, and also maybe you lose some body and some foam characteristics in the final beer. Maybe it's a good thing because you have less fan in the finished beer, which might actually help your shelf life a little, and that beer usually holds up pretty well. But yeah, so like, and after going through all this, we might see slight color differences. Like if we use like black or blue corn, we might see like a slight like pink hue in the beer. But then if we adjust pH prior to packaging, that kind of goes away. So it's just like, and I have to be honest, like I would love to say, man, there's just a huge difference between every single variety that we use. This one gives us that and this. We've done like so many different sensory panels, and really it's just such a light ingredient. It's so hard to stand up to malt like that. I think the way that Sugar Creek, Caleb over at Sugar Creek Malting in Indiana, and some of those like malted corn, and I haven't tried any, but I've seen some of the corn malting that he's doing, and some other breweries that are making like 100% corn beers with corn malt, and I'm like, that's probably the way to do it if you really want like a real strong like tortilla chip flavor or something like that. Like I think maybe doing something like that might be really interesting, but I don't know. Like right now, we're still just trying to figure it out with the new brew house. We'd like to up the percentage a little on some of those beers and see what it does, and see if we get a little more corn expression from there. But it is a really cool ingredient. We did tell the difference right away when we jumped from pre-gelatinized flakes to like real corn. You definitely got more of that like fresh tortilla flavor that we were looking for. So that definitely made sense when we made that change and started using real corn, local corn from the area.
And what kind of barley malts are you using?
Yeah, so we get heavily taxed with malt from the U.S. coming into Mexico. It's actually cheaper for us to bring in European malt, and we've developed some relationships with two big maltsters, and one is in Bavaria. They're near Nuremberg. They're called Schuma, and they've been around about 200 years. Supposedly the same Barca malt that we use is the same malt that goes to Augustiner. If you're an Augustiner fan, it's supposedly the same malt going that way. But we've also gotten we also buy Steffi malt from them, or Steffi barley variety malt, and we buy the regular Pils malt, which is just it's whatever they choose at the moment. And it's really nice product, great people to work with, good pricing, and they've helped us a lot. I don't think they have a distributor in the U.S., so I've had people really like, who are they? But if you go to that part of the world, there's just so many small maltsters around that are they're just not Environment, they're not best. They're there and they're making good stuff. So, and then we also use a Bohemian maltster called Staccato that they're in Czech Republic. Main office and operations are in Prague. But obviously they're bringing malt in from the fields outside of Prague. So, or barley, I mean. And we messed around with several different, when we were trying to make our Czech beer, we messed around with or Czech beers, I should say. We messed around with like several different types of, form malted or not form malted, or different, just Bohemian varieties or Moravian varieties. And, this was the one we really liked. It just seemed to have a little bit more character, a little bit more like biscuit in the finished beer. You can kind of find some of those, and we really stuck to it. And again, it's about, this probably better than anyone. It's just about those relationships, and when you start meeting up with people in the industry, and they're stoked on what you're doing, and they like your product, and you like their product, and you just end up having a friendship, and that's kind of how it's been for us. So we basically deal with those two. Of course, we buy specialty malts from all over the place too. We don't use a ton of non-base malt, or we don't make a ton of non-base malt only beers, but we do obviously need some of the environment stuff, some of the Simpson or Fawcett stuff too. So, I mean, just depends on what we're doing. Yeah.
Cool. That's exciting. Yeah, I mean, I guess I did have some of those malts in the beers earlier this year, and yeah, they are tasty. So cool.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, I guess so now I kind of wanted to ask you about the earlier part of your career. You worked at Cigar City for, I don't know, what's maybe like the golden age of craft beer in the US, sort of that sweet spot, 2014 through 29.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those were good times. Like, kind of like the same feeling maybe if you were like involved anywhere on the real estate industry in like the 2008 era. Like, you're like, this is like weird. This is like, is this solid ground? You know, is this too good to be true? And of course it wasn't. But like, I mean, it was fun to live through that, you know, and it just like, it was excess. It was just traveling nonstop and you know, making tons of friends all over the place, and you know, nothing was off limits, and just all these crazy barrel aged beers and beer releases and Hunupu's Day that we had, stuff like that. So it was a great time. I feel like, you know, you were definitely active in that era too, and I feel like it was almost like someone. I mean, I'm not a military guy at all, but it's almost like someone that was in the Marines during the 80s or something like that, and maybe had a 20-year career but never went to any kind of like action. But like, just the quick 6 years I was at Cigar City, every day was, I mean, we grew, you know, like 13 or 14 fold in the years that I had started there up until when I left. So it was so much experience packed into a short amount of time. Just so you walk away with that with just a lot of not just confidence, but you know, you've made so many mistakes and saw so many things happen in such just a few years that you kind of can go into the next thing maybe with a couple more tools under your belt, you know, that can help you later.
Yeah, some serious on the job training in all sorts of different ways that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, definitely. It happened for everyone, I think, in that era that was working at any type of regional brewery. You know, you're just inundated constantly with all kinds of new brands and new just growth that's honestly not even healthy for anyone to have that much growth at the same time. But it was a lot of fun. I gotta look back and smile about it.
Some trade-off for all the wear and tear.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I mean, and I have never, I did never go to Cigar City, but I had the beers, and you know, I remember as soon as we started getting like distribution of like High Life, you know, that was like a huge deal. And it was like, I mean, Cigar City is like everybody everywhere in craft beer knows Cigar City. What was like, you know, I guess the beginning, you know, the beginning of your time there, and like what was kind of, I don't know, were there kind of phases, or was it all kind of like a blur of just, yeah, the golden age?
Well, yeah, it was a little bit. I mean, but I mean, even though we were kind of flooring it when I first started there, like, I think they started brewing in 2009. I think I started talking to them about coming on in 2010, and then I mean, I was kind of just working like part time in brew pubs up to that point, and I had my own like full time job. I really didn't want to like be a brewer. That wasn't my goal. Like, I didn't want to like turn my hobby, because I was like, I loved home brewing at the time and working in like brew pubs on the side, whatever. So like, I didn't want to like turn that into like a job, I guess. So like, I was a little reluctant, but you know, those guys I could see were just killing it. And Florida had not seen anything like that. We didn't have any breweries like Cigar City with well thought out marketing, well thought out beers, you know, recipes, formulas, and processes just kind of like that were, yeah, you could tell somebody's really giving a shit for once. And I go like, okay, well, I got to see what's on the other side of the door. So when I started, you could tell that, like, I think that week that I started, I think we were doing a collab with Bill Farmstead. And I think like around that time, it was like all kinds of McKellar collabs and just, so you started seeing like that entire like collab circuit thing happening like there. And you started seeing like, wow, this is like really starting to blow up. So we only had a few employees on production. We were brewing on a 15-barrel brew house. I started there on the night shift. So like, I didn't really even see anybody for the first year that I was there because I did that for a while. Really just burned the candle at both ends and just made a ton of. I probably did like 60,000 barrels. I know it wasn't that much, but it was just an insane amount of highlight on that 15-barrel brew house. And meanwhile, we were growing so fast that, I mean, just promoting from within and hiring new packaging people constantly. We had a new CFT canning line that we got going in, I think, 2012. It was like around 200 cans per minute. And then we had a new, like Joey who was the owner of Cigar City at the time, he had gone to CBC. I think Frank Ma sold him like a Chinese brew house, a 30-barrel 4-vessel, like pretty much sight unseen. I think it was a showroom piece or something, but it took like a year and a half to get that thing going. And made a lot of mistakes on that thing too. And we, I think we got that thing going around 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. And then we really started cranking just a ton of different beers. And that brew house was made for just like most brew houses at that time, it was just made for 12 Plato or 10 Plato lager beer. It wasn't really made for 32 Plato stout that's going in the barrel. So we had to, let's just say we were highly inefficient, but it was cool because, I felt like, I'm just a brewer seller guy for a year, and then I'm the lead brewer, and then I'm production manager. And then it's like, along with Madison, who was the director, I'm like, this is our show. And now we have like 60 something employees, and this is insane. And it happened like so fast. And I'm like, yeah, I felt like this is madness. It's kind of still like a blur to think about it, but and you can think about all the varieties of those days, like I kind of hate it because we kind of just spoiled everyone, and we kind of just made so many different styles, and we had so few core brands, let's say, at Cigar City, that it ended up just being like, every other day, if you didn't have a new beer on, people would just get like, oh, really? Just the same old boring stuff, huh? Like no one in those days, it was like sensory overload. It was like, just, I don't know, Netflix or something, just way too many options. And yeah, so I mean, I don't think you guys really went through that at Live Oak. From my memory, I always remember you guys just having the Vice beer and some of the lagers and the Grod later on. But yeah,
we're an exception to that, but I mean, yeah, mostly, maybe a little bit less these days, slightly, but yeah. There was, you could get whatever you want and new things all the time. Yeah, that was always, I mean, kind of seeing that, but only making just the same boring, hazy wheat beer. Yeah, I wasn't envious of that, having to do that. And I'm fortunate that we have a little bit of that with the taproom outlet where we get to kind of do both, make new beers, but only a small amount.
Yeah, I mean, when I got to Mexico, I had been, Wayne Wambles is a fun guy that I worked with for a while, the brewmaster at Cigar City. So he wasn't super hands-on. He was in the early days, but he wasn't super hands-on during my career there. But I mean, the guy had a very culinary mind. He came from a culinary background, and yeah, he had a lot of crazy ideas. A lot of them worked out and put us on the map, which was pretty cool. But I think when I got out of there and I got to Mexico, I was like, okay, we're gonna make like, beer flavored beer again, and just make like Hellas and I don't know, like beers that people want to drink a lot of.
Cool. So we're going to take a short break for this message and then come right back for more of this conversation with Josh Brengle of Cervecera Hercules.
Did you know that lemon myrtle actually has more lemon aromatics than lemons? Rich aromas, delicious flavors, and bright colors. This is what First Tea's herbs and botanicals can infuse into craft beers. Email info@firsttea.com. That's FIRSDTEA.com to learn more about using a wide range of herbs and botanicals.
I'm Bo Baden from Sherman Street Beer Company in Allentown, PA, and I use Malt Europe because the malt works great, tastes great too. We use Malt Europe malts exclusively because of the quality and their service. I've been super happy with the overall performance as well. Contact Malt Europe today and visit malteurupmaltingco.com.
This episode is also sponsored by Stomp Stickers, one of our favorite partners when it comes to printed brewery products. Stomp Stickers is a reliable resource for printed items such as beer labels and boxes, keg collars, coasters, and more. Visit stompstickers.com and use code Brewer for 15% off of your first order.
Welcome back. Yeah, so Josh, now I've been, very excited to ask about when I was going to try to come down there and you were talking about the expansion. Sounds like you're going from like 8,000 hectoliter capacity to like 80.
Well, so I think the theoretical maximum that we could do is around 80, based on, and it depends highly like on which beers are selling and how that's going to be going over the next few years, just because obviously tank times change based on if it's like one of our ales or something like that versus like maybe one of our lagers that we might give more tank time to. So, but we're set up to do a lot more. The brew house can handle a lot, obviously, because kind of like you guys got a Braucon, we got a Casper Schultz, and we can actually, we don't have a
Very
buffer
nice.
tank, but yeah, they've been great to work with. We're still like, I wouldn't say the brew house is fully commissioned. We are brewing, but we're still missing some details, but they've been great to work with. We didn't get like a buffering tank or like a surge work, what do you call that thing? A wort surge tank or something like that.
The pre-run?
Pre-run, yeah. We didn't get one of those, but we can start lautering the next one into the mash tun as we're boiling the previous one. So we can get up there on brews per day, depending on what the mash schedule looks like. So I mean, we can easily make a lot of work. The bottleneck is going to be beer storage, and also if anyone listening ever makes it down, it's just a magical place where we're at. It's honestly just, regardless of what you think of the beer and the food and everything else, the ambient and the history there is out of this world. Like it really, it's a true destination to see at some point. I recommend it to anyone.
I've seen some pictures of the building. I forget what they call the like sloped and vertical, like natural light access roof is like along a lot of it. Which is, that's ideal. And there's also like it has a pub and a bar, and you can go and drink the beer there as well, right?
Yeah, we have like a 1,200 person beer garden. So like you can enjoy the beer garden, enjoy live music on Sundays. There's always events. We have concerts often. And then we also have a hotel on site that, it's like a new boutique hotel that they're honoring and kind of like honoring, I guess, the architecture that is now 150 plus years old when they built the textile plant. So like they didn't like just tear it down. They kind of kept everything the way it was, and it kind of has like a hacienda feel to it. So it's open air. It's really awesome to have some beers in the beer garden and just walk to the hotel and relax. And over there they have a spa also. But I think like, that entire aspect to it, it's hard to keep up with. I think it's hard to put the beer on the level of the place, even because it's just like the place is so cool that it's hard to like keep up with everything else, like or make the beer on that level. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, so like the So the small neighborhood though that we're in is also like a little bit restrictive because it's a small one-way street. You know, when we were getting the brew house equipment in, or when we get malt deliveries in, because we get everything in by container, it's pretty riveting for for the entire neighborhood. I mean, we block traffic. You know, they're all most people are supportive of us in the neighborhood of Hercules, but some of them are like, okay, guys, what are you guys doing here? They see all the equipment coming in, they just think we're gonna like steal all the water, and but we also employ 300 people from the neighborhood, so we try to keep like we try to hire local as much as we can. But
Mm-hmm.
I understand even if we haven't hit the tank limit on what our production could be, I think maybe the limiting factor might just be the neighborhood trying to get that much finished beer out and trying to get that much raw
Uh-huh.
materials in and also spent grain out and everything like that. It could be quite arduous. So, you know, we're kind of like just, it's a risk we decided to take when we decided to expand there instead of expanding offsite. So we're just
Mm-hmm.
kind of rolling with it and trying to keep the neighbors on our side, keep everyone else happy, and you know, hopefully we can keep making a lot of beer here. So and keep growing this thing.
Mm-hmm. Did you need to also upgrade the wastewater with on your end as part of the expansion, or is that something that's the city has
We
capacity for?
they do have the capacity. In fact, they prefer that we don't treat our water so they can tax us. So like,
Mhm.
um, but we are putting in a wastewater plant. We did just put one in on the beer garden, and that's just what do you call it, a it's just for the bathrooms. I forget the name. It's not like yeah, it's a biological plant. So like, and then we're
Uh-huh.
putting in like a chemical physical plant for the actual brew house and production area. So that hasn't started yet, but we also have like, that's why I said like we're still in the middle of this a little bit. Like we have a CO2 recovery plant that we're still installing. You know, a brand new keg washer filler that's not up and running yet. We have
Mm-hmm.
sour reactors that aren't running yet, yeast propagation, but we are making work. We are getting it into tanks, it's just not fully operating yet. There's a lot of grinding and welding, and it's still like a construction site pretty much. So like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And how are you polishing up your lager beer in the cellar at the moment? Is that going to be the same technology with the expansion?
That's a really good question, man, because you know, right now we do a combination between cartridge and lenticular filters, and it actually works really well. You know, depending on the finished beer that we want. We do some beers that are just slightly hazy. We might go in with like an 8 micron lenticular or something like that. And we have
Mm-hmm.
others that are like, obviously we're going down pretty tight. We want to have a real stable product on the shelf, and we want to have a brilliantly clear beer when you're drinking it, especially on a bright sunny day in the beer garden. You want to be able to breathe through that thing. Um, but we are like looking at the future and trying to figure out, you know, what's better, you know. So like we've always had a centrifuge on the table. I've worked with centrifuges before in other jobs, so like I'm familiar with that. But we're also like and I guess you guys probably have a centrifuge at Live Oak, right?
We don't. We have just lenticulars, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
coarse and a fine,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a two-stage that we do all the lager beers through. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
still okay size for us now. We can, flush and re-sterilize and yeah, get
Mm-hmm.
good life out of the cartridges. And I'm not sure. Well, not we were trying to decide if a centrifuge was going to be a thing for us, but since we wouldn't use it for the wheat beer. It's yeah, we'll see how long we can wait until there's like
Mm-hmm.
some new cross flow membrane,
Yeah, I
technology.
was just going to mention that because I mean, I was I have a friend that works for sales for the company that Omnia that sold one just recently to Beer Shot, and so I was asking
Hmm.
Ashley about that, and she's really stoked on it. And she's like, yeah, I can run 30 hectoliters an hour, and get brilliantly clear beer with zero
Wow.
oxygen pickup, and I go like, she was sending me pictures and stuff, and I just said, wow, like the centrifuge does give you some flexibility. I think, like, especially, for certain beers that you want to get yeast out, centrifuge is great, but, and maybe you don't want it perfectly clear, but you want the yeast out. Vice beer might be a perfect example of that, where you just want most of the yeast gone, but you want, a lot of that, high molecular weight protein staying in solution, or low weight, sorry. But I think and that's why a lot of the Bavarian brewers, I think, do that. But I think, the crossflow sounds awesome if you're making just lager beer and you want brilliant lager beer all the time. I think that sounds really cool.
So since you're kind of, I guess you've been making it's kind of been the main, like your main few lager beers have been the majority of production with some smaller batch runs, but you've been making the same beers mostly for the last, 8 years or so. Is that right?
More or less, I would say a lot of those came out, like the rye lager, which is our biggest seller. It's kind of like a Keller beer. It's not filtered, but it's clear enough, and it's like a Zwickel beer. That one came out a few years after I started. Everything's kind of trickled out. When I first got on, I didn't really make a mad dash to just change everything, but it's happened organically and slowly over the years, just mostly watching the consumers and watching what people are drinking and how they like to drink them, and we still make a vast amount of beers per year, meaning just a crazy amount of styles. I would like to decrease that number a lot. I think at our high point, which was probably just prior to the pandemic, we were doing like 100 different beer styles a year. Turning into Cigar City again, pretty much, which was like, we had to kind of decrease that. And now, and most of those were classic styles or full or fun conceptual stuff. We have we have a wild beer program too. We have a cool ship, so we do all these spontaneous beers also, and blending on that side. We live in wine country, so that gives us a lot of fun projects to do with local wineries, like using palm must, using must, and using finished wine too, even. But yeah, long story short,
I had heard the Querétaro is like a wine and wine and cheese, a lot of cheese making in the area too.
Yeah, the cheese in Querétaro is legit. I mean, I recommend anyone that comes to visit us or comes to Querétaro at all just to go hit up some of the local creameries. Like El Rebaño is just amazing what Gabby's doing over there. She's probably one of the most award-winning cheesemakers in Mexico, if not the most, and her cheeses are just, I mean, they're world-class. Boca Negra is near us too. They do great hard cheeses that have been aged for some time, but Gabby's more on the cream side, like your Camembert style, stuff like that. But she does it really well. And then wine country, you have just about everything. So it gives us a lot to work with, a lot of collaborative, spirit in the air also, because we have a couple local breweries and we're good friends with them as well. Like Cuatro Palos is really cool, and Punta Media also is really cool, and they both make great beer. So we all kind of collaborate together, but it's also great to step out of the beer world and collaborate and do like an event with or a pairing with some of the local cheese makers, or do like a beer and wine thing with some of the local wine. It's there's a lot of options there, I'd say.
So I guess let's see. So with like the expansion and all the new equipment, is there any I don't know, subtle techniques with, I guess maybe some of the, well, I guess the lager beer is a good chunk of the volume. In my head, I was thinking it was more representative of the overall volume, but adjusting subtle flavors in the lager beer, are you making any kind of I don't know, are you excited about any like small changes outside of all the equipment upgrades that you'll be getting over this next, year or two?
Hell yeah, that's the short answer. Like, I think, like our old brew house was an old like Creveller brew house, with a mash louder combi.
Mm-hmm.
And we did put in the cereal cooker later, but going through any sort of complicated mash schedule was very difficult. Decoction was like very hard, and we had to get creative on how to do some of that stuff. So I think like with the Czech styles, decoction is just super necessary, and maybe with a lot of the Bavarian style beers we do, maybe not as much unless you're talking about like Weiss beer or something like that. Like we don't really decoct any of our like our Helles or anything like that, or our pills, just because we've seen that the shelf life decreases quite a bit. But that said, this new brew house is a lot more gentle. I would say it's a lot gentler on the wort than our previous brew house. And the first few batches that we made so far, you can definitely taste that. It's I don't know. I think for me, like I want to be able to hit rest better, like which we weren't able to do. I'd like to be able to acidify our wort better, which we were doing, but with this we have a sour grit plant, so we have like a biological sour grit reactor, which will just make like
Yeah, that's gonna be cool.
Yeah, because I think it is such a it is such a integral part in the flavor of like Bavarian lager. Like, and it does present itself as like this white grape, or maybe even white Gatorade, or sometimes like yogurt type note that's in the beer. And I think pH is super important to those brewers over there, like throughout the entire process. So not just on the hot side, also in fermentation, because yeah, they're looking at the shelf life, and they're looking at the drinkability of that, and pH and total acidity have a lot to do there. So also, like we have open fermentation room now. Also, we have two 70 hectoliter open fermenters, so we already did our first like Czech pale lager in one of those, and you could definitely just tell right away how the yeast has expressed itself differently than on a CCT like we used to do. So
wow.
I think
is that in a yeah, that's in a are those in their own room?
Yeah, they're in their own room. We don't have like air filtration or anything like that yet, but we're also only leaving it in there 3 to 4 days. It's only once we get down to like 60% attenuation or so, we're like when the high corrosion is starting to kind of fall, we're moving that to the secondary. So it's crazy too, because if you go to Europe, if you go to Bavaria, Franconia, even parts of Czech Republic, like most of those breweries that I've been to don't have any type of air filtration. They're just banking on the fact that, positive pressure, I guess. And if you go to any of the big rooms, do you guys open ferment there?
No, well, not really. We kind of, we simulate it with like horizontal tanks. Some of them are still old dairy tanks that have the top manway with like no, they're low pressure, but they're not like, or no pressure building, but they're not like rectangles that are totally open. So
it's a really good trick. I mean,
kind of.
It's a really nice trick to get a little bit less pressure on the yeast, and get the yeast to express itself in a different way. I think like I saw that at Weinstefan some years ago, and I was like, oh, that's really smart. Like that's cool.
Yeah, and yeah, we're believers in the horizontal. It's all yeast luxury over here for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So then we have like a yeast prop. We have a flotation tank for cold sedimentation also. So like just like I'm sure you're getting on that BrauCon, just like really clear work coming out. We could never.
Oh yeah.
We could never attain that on our old brew house. It was just always hazy, and we had to cheat and do so many things. Like we would do before pitching yeast. We couldn't get our wort down to the right temperature even, because we pitch pretty cold on our Czech and Bavarian lagers, depending on the strain that we're using. So like we would almost like cooling at like, I don't know, like 50 Fahrenheit or something like that, or 52, 53, maybe even warmer, and set it to the temperature we wanted it with some CO2 head pressure so that we could kind of get two things to happen. We'd get the wort to the temperature we wanted it to, and then we'd also get a lot of that, cold breakout. Otherwise, it was just a pain in the ass filtering and everything like that. It kind of like seemed to just bond with the yeast, and it would never, it was hard to get clear beer in the end. So that was a trick we used to have to do. And now it's great because I can just look at the wort coming off the heat X and I'm like, wow, that's fucking clear. That's awesome.
Congratulations. But we had our upgrade was significant as well on wort clarity. So what lager yeast are you guys using down there, and how do you manage it, and do you get new props, or what's that like for you guys?
So for our Czech yeast, we use like a Urquell like H strain. It's like I guess it's like a WLP 800 equivalent. Like we've used several. We haven't seen a lot of difference between the different yeast companies. So we'd use that for the Czech beers. We use a 3470, but we kind of get it direct from the Hefebank in Weinstefan. Like it's through a different lab that's in the U.S. But what we were seeing and what we saw with this other group of brewers that we're in, I don't know if you ever follow these guys at the Modern Brew House, but it's like this forum. Anyway, they were seeing, and they did a lot of like sensory testing and process testing on the different versions of 3470 that were out there in the market. And by far, the most flocculent and most attenuative one is the one you can get from the Hefebank and Weinstefan. So they started baking that in the U.S., that strain, and I've been using that one now for a couple of years. It's just a beautiful yeast. I mean, I can't say it's that much different than the other 3470s, but I do see it flock better, and I do see it attenuate better. It loves pressure. So like if we do start spooning early or prematurely because it's a weekend or whatever, it actually seems to ferment better under pressure than not. And we're on the hoppy beers and other stuff like that. We do keep a British strain in, like a Coors equivalent, but we also do like we're starting to move like all of our West Coast style IPAs and pale ales and stuff like that over to the 3470, kind of like Highland Park does. And just we're kind of messing around with that right now. And just to make yeast management, we just saw like on this new plant, we kind of like from day one, we kind of doubled our cellar capacity just right off the bat. And that doesn't mean that we're going to double the amount of beer we're making, but I wanted to make yeast a little simpler, than having like 6 strains in house and like, right now we got, it's always, I'm sure it's the same for you guys, because I'm sure you guys got like a Weissbier yeast and then a lager yeast and then probably one other ale strain or something like that. So it's never easy to manage all that.
We make enough Czech pills compared to all the other German lagers, so we always have the Czech and German yeast, and then the Hefeweizen. But usually it's just that, and we're making hoppy beer, IPA with lager yeast now, and that's great.
The first few beers that we've had come out with using the 3470, we've done plenty of like cold IPAs and stuff like that in the past, so I didn't think it was going to be that much of a big deal to change it up. But it's definitely just simplifying things. And then occasionally, if we want to bring in like a Kolsch yeast or alt beer, or I don't know, like a Weissbier strain or something like that, it makes it a little easier to like throw another seasonal yeast strain in than having a bunch of different ones. Yeah.
And a different flavor spectrum, which we kind of do seasonally. You guys are making a smoke beer, the Rauchfest.
Yeah, I know you guys do some Rauchbier up there. Like this one we made for our Oktoberfest. It was just a smoked fest beer. It hurts me to talk about fest beer because we used to have our own smoker, and we started sharing it here on site with the kitchen. And the kitchen was smoking their own meats inside, and it got really greasy. And then we decided to get away from like smoking malts in there. It was looking pretty gnarly, like, which is great for smoked meats. I mean, the food comes out awesome, but I was just a little worried about like bringing over any kind of fat or anything from the meats into the brew house. You know, not just for someone that might be a vegan or something like that. I don't know if any of that would make it to the finished beer, but also, yeah, maybe head retention and stuff. But we were using like beechwood and maplewood to smoke, and we were making just some amazing cold smoke malts on site some years ago. But now we just buy from our local supplier, or not our local, our Malteurop in Bavaria. We'll buy some smoked malts and use those, and they're really nice. But the goal
is that flavor with like the, you know, your local beer drinkers, is that are they receptive? Is it like a new flavor that they're willing to try, but they, I don't know, what's that like? Because I mean, have you guys made, you know, I mean, you've been making some.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's, for me, I don't think Rauchbier anywhere, maybe not even in Bamberg, is it like it's kind of like a fun thing to do. But I always see it as just like maybe not the most beloved style throughout the world. For me, it's something that I love to drink. And this last one, because we were selling it at our Oktoberfest event, and we only did like 15 barrels of it. You know, it went pretty quick actually. It was only around maybe another week after Oktoberfest, it was gone. Yeah, so I think people drink it, but I don't think they drink it often or I mean, we've had some of those beers that have just sat on tap for a while in the past, and I'm like, dude, this is like a world class root beer that we just got lucky and we were able to make, and it's like maybe it's just because of the climate, and maybe it was the wrong time of year or something like that. But I would say they go okay. It's just something that if we don't make them, I don't think we're gonna have anyone like riding outside the brewery like, where's the smoke beer, man? What happened? Like, I don't think. But I wish it was like that. I wish we had like a full on like social unrest if we ran out of smoke beer. That would be a great feeling.
Maybe someday, but yeah, no breath holding for that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess so. We're kind of coming to the end. I did want to just, I mean, traveling around, and I'm always open-minded about eating food, and you know what, so when you moved, you know, you've been in Querétaro for a while, what are your, you know, favorite things to eat when you're...
Well, yeah, it's a good question. Querétaro is kind of like, I hate to say it, but every other state, there's 32 Mexican states. Querétaro is just one of them, and I would say it's one of the states that just does not bring it like the other states do, as far as like the culinary aspect. That said, you know, there's plenty of great food here, but if you go to Mexico City, or you go to, I would say like Guadalajara, you go up to the north to Monterrey, and you're eating, or even better, like Oaxaca, Chiapas. Like Oaxaca is for me like the culinary capital of Mexico. It's just amazing. But like if you go like to any of those other states, and then you go to Querétaro, you'll be like, oh yeah, it's all right. But like gorditas is like, the real gordita is from here. You know, the gordita is a corn tortilla, and it's stuffed with usually like beans or nopal, like it's cactus, or like usually it could be with carnitas or something like that too. It's actually quite amazing. It's simple, but it's just really nice. It is like food. So I would say like that's one of my go-tos when I'm here in Querétaro, or I'm off, like, you know, just eating something off the street or whatever. You can definitely find good tacos. You can find they have good enchiladas here also in Querétaro. They're kind of known for that. So there's a little bit of a range of food, and you can definitely find, if you have a favorite Mexican style food or something like that, you can probably definitely find it here. You just gotta look around.
All right. Well, Josh, thanks for joining me on the podcast. And
Son, I had one question for you real fast. Just, I know that's
okay.
not supposed to go that way, but what kind of, I mean, Live Oak just has an amazing like history, but what kind of styles keep you passionate, and what part of making beer still keeps you really stoked on what you're doing? And I mean, after all these years, it's hard sometimes to keep the energy behind it, and stay passionate. But is there like a beer style that you're really into right now, or something that you're working on that you're like, yeah, this is it. This is what's keeping me going.
Let's see. I mean, I think being lucky to have been, my whole career making like Czech pills and just kind of trying to make it the same and make it, better and try to keep the pipeline flow so the beer is like fresh, the flow of it all is, makes a big difference. But yeah, then all the variations that we can make in the tap room, which is, I don't know, maybe one a month. It's like enough of a balance to make the, everything, all the details are intentional. But yeah, it's fun using new hops and new malts and new malt varieties, new hop varieties, and trying different yeast to see how they perform. It's like that whole and to be able to drink it here, and it's still fun. After so long, I think it's just the subtle lager. And I mean, I am enjoying making the hoppy lagers, the cold IPAs too, because I do, we used to make we still sometimes, but we used to make it all the time, an IPA. And then when I started at Live Oak, it was all Columbus, and because we couldn't get Cascade that year or for a couple years.
Right.
And so now that I'm able to get like the good Columbus again and use that in a beer with, having just navigated the hop procurement gauntlet, and I can get, I think, what are like the best hops that I think I can get and use those. I do like how the lager yeast is just like, it just lets those hops at like, the higher amounts still just be really bright and true. So I'm enjoying the American hop.
It's pretty interesting how we've seen that evolution where you just see the malt bills get lighter and more simple over the last 10 years or so. And then also regarding yeast, like just letting the hops shine, which has always been kind of the star of the show. And I totally agree. I think I've been so focused on lagers for pretty much all my career. Me personally, that's what's interested me. And now I'm finally turning my head and being like, hey, we make pretty good IPAs, but I think we can make them way better. And I'm finally getting turned on by that a little bit now, and like going down the IPA, getting back into the IPA thing, but in a more current way. And just like, I think that's been really exciting, seeing what some of those guys at like, North Park or Green Cheek or Highland Park are doing to get like these really expressive hoppy beers. Pint House too is one, but like, I think that's also for me has been pretty interesting to go down that road.
And enabling the just the IPA, but using the lager yeast, the 3470, which we already have, and other people are using that more, and it's just it's kind of aligning to not be like a stretch to get those beers out. So we're making slowly a little bit, more and more of that style, which I enjoy.
My wife has family in Texas, so we go up once every year or two. So I when I'm up there, I drink the crap out of your beers, but next time I'm up there, I gotta make it to the brewery. I've never been, so
come by. Yeah. Well, thanks, Josh. And Josh will be back on the next episode of this show for as the host for having a conversation with a brewer of his choosing. That will be on the air in 2-ish weeks. So make sure to tune in for that. And a reminder to visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. I'm Dusan Kwiatkowski of Live Oak Brewing. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast.
First Tea is your source for chamomile, hibiscus, ginger, and a whole host of herbs and botanicals. Whether you're working on a new experience or want to give your existing brews a boost, contact First Tea for the botanicals you need. Email info@firsttea.com. That's FIRSDTEA.com.
I'm Bo Baden from Sherman Street Beer Company in Allentown, PA, and I use Malteurop because the malt works great, tastes great too. We use Malteurop malts exclusively because of the quality and their service. We've been super happy with the overall performance as well. Contact Malteurop today and visit malteuropmaltingco.com.
Today's episode was also sponsored by our friends at Stomp Stickers. Stomp is a proud member of the Brewers Association that produces a wide variety of printed brewery products, such as beer labels, keg collars, coasters, beer boxes, and much more. Stomp's website features an easy-to-use design tool, low quantity orders, fast turnaround times, and free domestic shipping. Visit stompstickers.com and use code BREWER for 15% off of your first order.